Ukraine, if it counts as an island or not. But from the Glenn,
I'm here.
We were just finishing discussing Snake Island here and what's going on there. We already made our way around, but Glenn, I wanted to bring you in because I've got some travel ahead of me. So this is going to be probably our last broadcast for a while. And I wanted to just get with you and Dave and zoom out to the strategic level a bit around May 9th and Putin's anticlimactic day. His Gerasimov wasn't even there. I don't know if that meant he's wounded or out of favor, but he didn't show up for his own victory parade for the Russian armed forces. And Russia's now apparently about to or trying to prepare the ground for annexation of Kherson and all these areas that they've conquered, Zaporizhia, southern Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and the Donbass, and they've been kicked out of or getting kicked out of Kharkiv Oblast. And Ukraine has now stated that all territory will be recovered is their war aims, whereas at the beginning Zelensky was a little bit softer on territorial claims. It looks like war aims are getting very hard on both sides, and Ukraine is starting to get some momentum around Kharkiv. Glenn, where do you see things from your side? I know you've been following things closely. I just wanted to get your overall summary after before we go into what do you think the summer is going to bring here, because we're going to have a break here for a little while before we do one of these again.
It's interesting because I'm not sure why Kharkiv was chosen for sort of you could say the counterattack, Kharkiv area, whether that was just where it happened. My suspicion is that is where it happened, not that it was a focused choice. Because frankly, if I was going to go anywhere in strategic terms, I'd go south, because the big problem is, as you say, is the Russian attempts to annex the whole of the south area and claim it as being Russia, and that's a worrying thing, because if they claim it as being Russia, then I am sure that some of the international countries will go weak on this, like Germany and France, and let Russia keep the ground that it's got and try and persuade Zelensky that well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. Let them have this area for now and then try and get it back later, which will be extremely dangerous, because once you've given Russia something, you're not going to get it back unless you fight for it. We have the evidence from Georgia, Moldova, and everywhere, Syria, and everywhere else they are. So I think this is a really dangerous time for Ukraine at the moment, and that it can't afford to not focus on the main tasks and hit the main areas and basically, in my mind, get into Crimea, because I think if they get into Crimea, then the whole thing will unravel. If they just try and fight bit by bit by bit, like Ukraine, like in Kharkiv, and then a little bit south and another little bit south, then they could be there forever. They've got to actually break the will and break the morale of the Russian armed forces somewhere where it really hurts. Kharkiv is obviously not it, but that's what they're doing. So that is where they are. I read that they are taking troops from the east, the Donbass area, to take them up to Kharkiv to retry and take back the land that they've got in Kharkiv. And obviously they want to do that because that area to the southeast of Kharkiv is the main supply route to Izium, where they're actually fighting quite hard at the moment. And there's something like if you believe the pictures that there are there, there's maybe 8 or 12 battalion groups, possibly even more, around Izium, waiting to attack south. And so any chance to for the Ukrainians to break the supply lines to that could actually be fatal for the Russian forces in Izium, because if you've got 12 battalion groups, that's an awful lot of food you need. It's an awful lot of ammunition you need. It's an awful lot of fuel you need. And that's not something you can do in 5 minutes. It's a serious activity. So if they manage to start destroying trucks coming in on that line down to Izium, it's the sort of thing that could actually break the forces in Izium quite easily. Jumping down to Mariupol, I mean, Mariupol is in shitty state, and people are trying to get the injured military out, but I don't think Russia's going to let them. I mean, I think Russia's aim is to kill every member of Azov that they can, or parade them on the Red Square as the evil Nazis. I just don't see that anything that comes out of Kiev or the United Nations towards getting these guys out is going to work, because it's politically dynamite for Ukraine, for government to let any of the Azov battalion back into Ukraine, because they're going to actually to talk, they're going to be aggressive, they're going to be political. And so I just don't see that Kiev wants that to happen. This is a really, really difficult time in that respect. And it's politically a very difficult time for the government at the moment, because a lot more people now are questioning why troops got out of Crimea, why there was no work done to prepare the army in the last 2 years. And I think those are the things that we actually need to look at the moment, because this political background is the dynamite that could actually upset the whole battle, left or right.
Mm-hmm. Well, Glenn, we'd gone through a lot of those areas, and thank you for jumping in and contributing on each one of them. I want to go to the issue of May 9th and the pending summer season, where maneuver is going to become much more feasible with off-road, with tanks as the spring mud clears up. And there was a lot of speculation about some kind of declaration of war or mobilization, and that didn't happen on May 9th. And it's clear that Putin doesn't seem to want to mobilize, because it would admit failure in his special military operation. Where do you see this going in terms of both the stated war aims of Russia, but their activities, and the same thing with Ukraine in terms of their stated war aims keep getting bigger, which is hard to walk back from, and where is Ukraine militarily in terms of raising more manpower, equipping them, and where could they apply that?
All right. Well, starting with Ukraine, I mean, the challenge with Ukraine is training, and training more human beings to actually to join the forces. I mean, they're losing a lot of people killed. There's no question, and you've got to replace those, and that means actually bringing people to the front line that are trained. You can't just bring butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers to the front line and expect them to be competent. They'll be brave. Of course, they'll be brave because they're Ukrainian, but they won't necessarily be competent. They won't know how to do night patrolling. They won't know how to do ambushes. They won't know how to do withdrawals and attacks and everything else, unless you actually give them proper training. So there's a fundamental problem here for the Ukrainians in setting up a training organization to deal with the 500,000, 600,000 people they've put into the volunteer forces that haven't had any training at all. And if they keep increasing their war aims, fine, you can manage with when you've got new equipment and everything else, but you've still got to have more manpower, because you're still going to lose manpower no matter how clever you are and whatever you do. So that's a big thing they've got to deal with. The Russians, I mean, this is really strange with the Russians. I mean, if Putin looks as though what he's going to try and do is devious methods to actually get people into the army. So you can't do big mobilization because, as you accurately said, this just highlights the failure of his system. So he's got to actually to have things persuading people by money, persuade by, you must help the great Russia in this, whatever. But whatever he does, he's got the same problem. Unless you train people properly, when you send them to the front line, they fail. And we're seeing with the Russians a huge amount of failure at the moment, and people giving up and putting their hands up, and and officers dying in large numbers because they're simply not trained to do what they're doing. They're simply not have not got the skills for coordinated battle actions. They can go in man to man and fight, but what they can't do is all the things that in the British or American or German military we learn to do as officers and troops, and that we practice how to do the more sophisticated operational activities. They don't have this. And so whatever he does, if he's not got people to train these people properly, he will pull them forward, and the numbers may increase, and they may have lots more battalion groups with tanks and everything else, but they're still going to be as garbage as the ones that we're seeing at the moment, which means that Ukraine has just got to hang on and fight and just keep destroying them until the system breaks. And how long that will be, I have no idea. But unless Putin actually sorts out his training system, the people he sends forward will just not be good enough to actually to deliver the programs and plans that he wants. I mean, as Dave will tell you, logistics is a serious academic subject. It's not something you can just do off the top of your head. You can't just send someone to do logistics. They're clueless about it. It's something, it's at least a master's degree subject to do properly on a battlefield. And better a PhD. And if you're just coming out of school and trying to logistics, and so Russia has got a major problem. They both got problems. Will still be on the Ukraine problems out quicker than the Russians can actually improve. Dave, back me up.
Yeah, and that will continue to be Russia's problem because they're not going to admit it. So you can't fix a problem when you don't admit you have one. I'm becoming increasingly less concerned on the Ukrainian side when it comes to training and logistics. It's still a challenge. It's still difficult. I have a feeling they're getting some help.
Yeah,
I have a feeling there's some good advisors in the right places, and that I get that feeling when I see M777s being employed on the battlefield correctly. They're firing with MET and good data. They've got good firing data because it's a precision artillery system and it's precise in its employment over the past week since they've arrived in the theater. That tells me there are advisors, right? I don't know where they're from. United States, Canada, Australia, Great Britain. There you go. Pick a combination thereof. The countries that use those systems. But there's people on the ground who are obviously, advising on how to work these systems and make it happen, because it is. All right. You just don't figure that out overnight.
Yeah.
But the Ukrainians are executing the system, right? They're receiving assistance in, preparation and planning, but they're executing it. And that's how you learn. How to take this over and do it for yourself. So I'm feeling much better about Ukraine. Yeah, they have help, but